This is CNN Breaking News.
All right, Anderson, thank you very much. Our breaking news tonight: protests spreading across this city in the wake of a grand jury's decision not to indict a white police officer in the chokehold death of an African-American man in July. We've got a lot to get to tonight. Just look at what's going on out on the streets of New York City. CNN's Chris Cuomo out on the streets tonight. He is joining us from, I believe it is Times Square. Chris, protesters were out in force in Times Square after the Michael Brown grand jury decision. What's happening there now after the Eric Garner grand jury decision?
All right, Don, obviously, the good news is this is a very different situation than Ferguson, both in tone and tactics that we're seeing. People are very angry. They believe that this was too secretive, that this prosecutor should not have investigated his own police force. And that is motivating a lot of the similar feelings to what we saw in Ferguson. And as we've known all along, the issues reverberate across the country. But here, a very different night than what we experienced recently in Ferguson. The police here have shut off the Henry Hudson Highway here where 12th Avenue leads into it on the west side of Manhattan. And the protesters have been pushed in to a group here, Frank. Let's show them where everybody is. And you have a mix. You have some college kids here, vocal, angry, hostile. And then you have people who've been here their whole lives, and they're chanting the things that you're used to hearing. They've added specific things to Eric Garner: "Don't breathe," "New York says no," but a lot of the familiar things that we've heard before, Don. And what they're saying is they don't want to create disturbances with the police. What they want to do is get their message out. So what they've done tactically is they organize in pockets where they move around the city, Don, and they find different areas, because New York City is not an easy city to protest in. Right. They're very good at corralling groups. But here they've been very effective, Don, at moving around, and the police have been effective. You'll see no riot here. They're here in a non-confrontational way. One other thing, Don, there are a lot of police in the crowd with the protesters in plain clothes. That's helped them anticipate things.
Yeah, I want to get more information on that, Chris. We're going to get back to you because right now I want to bring in New York City's Police Commissioner Bill Bratton. He joins me now on the phone. Commissioner Bratton, I appreciate your time. Explain to us, Chris is out in the crowd. He's over, he said, on the West Side Highway. What is going on? What is the strategy for the police department now?
Well, there are multiple strategies. One is to keep the groups moving. If they stop, lie down on the street, attempt to block traffic by forming chains, that we will make every effort to arrest them. And we have so far arrested about 30 this evening, with probably more to come. But I'd point out that the demonstrators are nonviolent. We have no reports of violence, no reports of vandalism. So we're working to allow them to have their protest, but at the same time, to the greatest degree possible, minimize inconvenience to the rest of the city. And so we are moving to break them up when they attempt to stop and they're not moving through traffic. When they move through traffic, they stop traffic for 5 or 10 minutes, and then they go on and the traffic's able to move along. So
the arrests are for what? Stopping traffic? What are they for?
Arrests would be for a variety of situations. I can't give you those specifics. I'm not on the scene, but officers on the scene would have a probable cause to make the arrest, so they will make the arrest.
All right, let's talk specifically about this case and the video, Commissioner. So many people look at that video and they say that you're asking us not to believe our own eyes. Eric Garner was selling loose cigarettes. He didn't appear to be violent. Explain what you see in that video.
I'm not going to talk about it. I have an administrative investigation that's going forward, so that investigation will look at all the circumstances now that the criminal investigation has concluded with the district attorney's office. I would point out that under our laws, under our government, we have a grand jury. That grand jury heard a lot of evidence that's not been available to you or I or to the public. They made a decision based on the evidence they saw. So we have to respect that judicial system. At the same time, we can certainly understand the anger of people, the frustration of people. A lot of people look at that video and see a very disturbing sequence of events. And so their frustration is quite obvious based on what you're showing on your station tonight with the demonstrations.
Can you discuss whether you think there was anything they could have done to...
I'm not going to discuss anything having to do with the case.
You can't discuss anything to do with it?
No, I'm going to be making a decision relative to the officer once we have our trial here. So I'm not in a position to discuss the case at all.
So you have the final say. Will you fire him?
That the process now moves into an administrative review to see if the officer or officers that were involved in the death of Mr. Garner were in violation of department policies and procedures, and if they were, to what extent. And based on that finding, if there's a finding of guilt, then a decision will be made as to appropriate penalty or discipline for that. So it's much too early in the process to even comment on that.
Commissioner, what is the takeaway of this for the average police officer?
Well, takeaway for the average police officer is the understanding that they have an extraordinarily difficult job, one that is evidenced by the circumstances that occurred here in New York, that in a moment a life can be lost, in a moment decisions made in response to instant decisions can be challenged in court, challenged in the media, challenged in administrative proceedings, challenged in the sense of review to determine whether those decisions were appropriate. So officers, police officers in the United States have probably the most difficult job in public government. And increasingly their activities are now available to scrutiny through video, as is in the case of Mr. Garner. And that has both been a benefit as well as a hindrance. And the benefit being that many departments, such as our own, are moving toward more widespread use of body cameras used by our officers, because we've found that that oftentimes helps to allow us to make informed decisions. But as was seen in the case of Mr. Garner, the grand jury reviewed the same video that millions have watched countless times and came up with a decision that that was not a criminal act committed by the officer. And that is their finding, and under our form of government, that finding stands.
Commissioner, I have to ask you, because you mentioned body cameras. How would body cameras have made a difference in this particular instance? Because this would...
I'm not going to speak to that at all. What body cameras would have done in any incident is give you a different set of perspectives. That you have one camera perspective there. In another circumstance, you might have had 2, 3, 4 cameras, depending on how many officers were equipped with cameras, how many civilian witnesses might have had cameras. We're moving into new territory in the 21st century where there's much more widespread availability of video. But as much as we think video is the final determinant, it is not. It's clearly that oftentimes there are many other elements that have come into a decision before a decision is made.
I asked you what the takeaway was for the average police officer. What about for the average African-American man? New York, Atlanta, Cleveland, St. Louis, Ferguson, any major city?
In terms of what is your question? Sorry.
I said, what is the takeaway when you have?
They're going to have to make their individual decision as to what the takeaway is for each and every one of them. In terms of what their issues are, what their concerns are, I'm not going to speak for them.
What can the police department do to restore trust between the department and members of the community?
We're doing a lot of it here in New York, in particular. That we're in the process of retraining the whole department on issues of use of force. We are in the process of acquiring body cameras. We're in the process of changing a lot of our guidelines relative to office procedures. This is a department that is incredibly interactive with its various communities, and some of what we see, unfortunately, such as the circumstances of Mr. Garner's death, are the rare exception and not the commonplace. We have also an issue that was of great concern to this community. The very large use of stop, question, and frisk has been reduced very significantly over the last several years, from about 700,000 incidents 2 years ago. This year we'll have fewer than 50,000. And the numbers of arrests that arise out of that reasonable suspicion stop have increased very dramatically, so that officers are using the strategy much more appropriately than they may have in the past. So that's one example of trying to find ways to reduce friction, tension, and areas of concern with the city's very diverse population.
Do you have a message to the Garner family?
The message is the same as anybody would reach out to them and express sorrow at the loss of their loved one.
Mm-hmm. You told the city council back in September that police were being too aggressive in minority neighborhoods and that it was eroding trust. Is this a case of over-aggressive policing?
I'm not going to speak to the case. I've already told you that. How many times you have asked that question?
No, I mean your words that you said back in September that police were being too aggressive in minority neighborhoods.
Speaking in a broader sense, nothing having to do with specificity relative to the Garner incident at all.
Yeah. in a broader
And
sense.
that's certainly an impression that the minority community has of this department. Certainly an expression, an opinion that was expressed during the recent election of the mayors and city council members, where a lot of them campaigned on the issue that they felt the police department was too aggressive, particularly when it came to issues of stop, question, and frisk.
Commissioner Bratton, thank you.
Okay, pleasure being with you.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Appreciate it. You as well.
Bye-bye.
I want to bring in now Tom Verney. He's here in the studio with me now. He is a former NYPD detective who, through his long career, worked as a patrol officer, a community policing officer, and a police academy instructor. What did you make of what the commissioner just said?
Well, he brings up a lot of valid points. I think there's a general disconnect between communities in general, whether it be New York City community, the Ferguson community, or otherwise, and the police and what the police can do, what goes into police training. The NYPD specifically actually has a program called the Citizens Police Academy, where someone like yourself or any citizen in New York City could go through this course. It's a 14-week course at the academy, and they can actually learn a condensed version of what a recruit would learn in 6 months. And it makes the training very transparent. The courses that are taught there are very hot-button issues: emotionally disturbed people, domestic violence. They go through a firearms simulator, so citizens will actually take the role in a virtual reality case of what a police officer would go through to see how they would react.
So the commissioner said that he wouldn't speak specifically to the case, obviously because it's ongoing, and that's understandable.
Right.
But you're a former member of the police department. When you look at this particular case and you look at the video of Eric Garner there, as someone, you've trained police officers.
Yes.
What do you see in that video?
Well, we see someone who was clearly not complying with the police. He was clearly under arrest. He had been arrested 30-some-odd times before, so he was no stranger to the criminal justice system. The officers had told him he was under arrest. Now, selling untaxed cigarettes is not in the hierarchy of crimes. Is not the greatest crime of the century, but nonetheless, this is a quality of life crime in New York City that the people of New York City in that community would want addressed. Mm-hmm. They tell their local politicians and they tell their precinct commanders, I want this, as among other issues, addressed, and the police go and do that.
You don't see excessive force in this video. Everyone is seeing, to the average layperson, to the civilian, this looks like excessive force. You have 4 police officers taking this man down who, you know, whether you want to say he didn't comply or what have you, but it seems like it was aggressive.
Right. Well, I mean, when I say he didn't comply, that's just based on the simple fact, when you see the video, that he did not turn around and put his hands behind his back and agreed to be handcuffed, which that would be compliance. Mm-hmm. There is a force continuum that all police departments use. And that could be, whether it be physical force, vocal commands, and then we have to kind of ramp it up to physical force when someone is not complying in a case.
All right,
like
Tom, stand by, because I need to get back out to my colleagues in the field now. I want to get to CNN's Deborah Farrick. Deborah, you're out there. Are you in Times Square? What's going on?
Where are they?
Deb, are you there?
Oh, yeah. Hey, Don, I apologize. There's a little bit of activity up here. We were walking along the West Side Highway. You can hear behind us, actually, a number of unmarked police vehicles. Their lights are on. They're actually shepherding the crowd, a couple hundred strong, who came off the West Side Highway, now marching down Broadway. We just passed Lincoln Center, and we're headed over to Columbus Circle, probably in your direction, Don. You can probably hear us making our way towards you right now. This is a very organic crowd. People heard about the demonstrations on Twitter, and they simply met up to join and to make their voices heard. A lot of people feeling very strongly that they wanted to take part in this. So we're now headed down to Columbus Circle, and there are about, I would say, 25, 30 police officers with officials that are also marching with their men that are carrying batons and wearing helmets just protectively. Very organized, very peaceful, and we are headed your way, Don.
All right, Deborah Farrick, stand by. Chris Cuomo, also the police commissioner, joining us this evening. If you're just joining us, the police commissioner, Bill Bratton of New York City, said there have been 30 arrests so far in New York City. He expects more to come. He said it's been nonviolent, and so far there has been no vandalism. But again, these are people who are exercising their right to protest, most of them peaceful here in New York City. We're carrying it for you live right here on CNN. When we come back, more on our breaking news. Protests spreading all across the city, this city tonight in the wake of a grand jury's decision not to charge a white police officer in the chokehold death of a black man here in New York. Don't go anywhere. We are live tonight.